So, in terms of the journey that I'm trying to have throughout this personal statement, I've just, spoken about the politics, and I then get on to more this meta ethics. Where does morality come from? It's an interesting usage of Sam Harris. Maybe that's something I changed. Sam Harris isn't a particularly, I don't know. He's very good for getting people into philosophy, and certainly one of the people who got me into it. Is he too serious a philosopher? I mean, he'd argue he probably was. Maybe I could have chosen something less. What's the word? Something more highbrow. But then again, I didn't want to speak about something I didn't know much about. So, this allowed me to bring in people like G.E. Moore, who's a key analytic philosopher. And in Cambridge, the focus of the course is analytic philosophy. And so I was able to bring that in. And it also allowed me to have something that I could heavily criticise, because I felt like I could understand Sam Harris's argument enough to criticise it. And again, you can see I've sort of given 4 lines to speaking about why I had issues with it. So I directly cite the analytic tradition here as well. And I think I actually, the other point to make is I was also studying a bit of YouTube. I don't know if any of you, so Cosmic Skeptic had also got me really into philosophy and this sort of debate about where morality comes from, particularly as an offshoot of religion. And I sort of was thinking about putting that in, and I said, well, actually, I don't need to. I can then speak about the highbrow stuff, but don't be afraid to be interested, start off on some easier things. I remember, so for example, looking at this next one, AJS, Language, Truth and Logic, I remember trying to read that at the start of my A-level course in philosophy and finding it really difficult. And then going back over it again, in that summer before planning my personal statement and finding it a lot easier. So sometimes you do need to read the original, you do need to go through some more easy stuff, YouTube, and then you can start to use some of these more complicated there's some more complicated literature. Probably edge towards using the complicated literature so long as you understand it in the personal statement because it's more impressive, but don't be worried about showing the different media you've used. Again, here, it's quite heavy analytic philosophy. It's not, it's not an amazing read, but, I think that, I've shown clear engagement with the material. I haven't just said books, but I've also engaged with the content of these books, and shown, okay, in my view, this presents a significant challenge, but I still disagree with this categorization of all metaphysical statements as nonsense. It's not just airy-fairy stuff. This might be a bit airy-fairy. It doesn't really lead to anything, but it does still track the impact different books and parts of philosophy have had on me. And again, so we carry on with this journey coming next. And so here, what I actually link in is a lot of the philosophy which we would have studied at A-level. So we had some philosophy of language in our philosophy A-level, which I think is still going. So, you have this, you do study the verification principle, you do study the falsification principle. I would also quickly point out that there's no necessity of having studied, you definitely don't need to have studied A-level philosophy to do it, for example, philosophy at Cambridge. It's a completely different course. It's nothing like, where, say, history, I know that'll be different, but it's a natural step up. It's actually just a very different subject. Philosophy, A-level, certainly GCSE is very focused on religion. I haven't encountered religion at all in my 2 years. Maybe that, if my tutors are watching, they might say I haven't been listening properly, but it's very, very different. And so, but anyway, I then could get on to some, I then got on to even more safer ground. If they asked me about this, I don't think they did in my interview. I would have felt quite comfortable with this. But this is really how my A-level and my philosophy linked in. And you'll see here, I bring up Tractatus, right, which is a book by Wittgenstein. And it's a lot more complex than the ideas of the falsification principle or the ideas of the parable of the paranoid man. But what I say is I don't just speak about the fact that I don't subscribe to his view. That might be relatively standard. That is just standard in philosophy. But I also say, okay, well, what can I point to in this book that I can say I truly understood? Not too much. famously about apparently only 3 people in the world at the time could understand it. But it was true. The one thing it really taught me is this idea of declarative statements. Now, it's an odd thing to pick up, but it's something I definitely picked up on, and it's something very key to Cambridge, is this key point of being, you need to really be clear on what you're saying. I know that's going to sound ridiculous given how much I've mumbled my way through this video, but it's really key to be clear. And that's something, if you are applying for philosophy at Cambridge, make sure you're clear in both in your interviews and in your personal statements. And this, I've sort of picked up on that, and I think that was a good one to show why I was suited to the course, because I had this, I picked up on that aspect, and why the course would be suited to me. Well, I really liked that, and it gave me greater insight. If you look, I remember really enjoying Philosophical Investigations by Wittgenstein. It is a bit easier to read, and there are definitely ideas you can pick up more easily and understand more wholly than in Tractatus. And it's a good one to read, Wittgenstein. It is very key to Cambridge. It's key to philosophy at Cambridge, so it is an important aspect of it. And if you look, what's happened is I've sort of started my philosophy. If we go back to, if we look at, I don't know if I can actually, I don't know if I have the technology, but if you think about the start where we spoke about on liberty and political philosophy, and social contract. Okay, there is a political philosophy section to the Cambridge course, and I was aware of that because I looked through the syllabus. Again, something important to do. So I wasn't just spending paragraphs going, is this, speak about stuff which was completely irrelevant. But also Cambridge really has its focus on analytic philosophy. And that's something which in the last two slides last two paragraphs I've really focused on. And so we then reach this sort of last slide. So I think in this slide I was very, very keen on just showing where's the others sort of track my journey perhaps. I've gone from my political philosophy to my meta-ethics, so political philosophy to morality, and then to the language behind the language through the sort of analytic ways of through the sort of analyses of the meta-ethics there. And after all that, I sort of want to start. I want to just show all of these things which didn't quite fit in. What have I done? What have I done outside of just my classic reading philosophy? Well, okay. So, what have I done? Okay, well, I've had a look at this argument from Frege. Now, this was the one thing where I went, do I properly understand this? And it's not easy to, well, no, it's pretty easy to say, probably not. And I remember originally I wanted to write a bit more about it because I thought it was a really important bit. Frege's sort of founder of analytic philosophy, so how would I, how could I link this in? I thought it was really important. I actually probably shouldn't have done. I probably shouldn't have mentioned this at all. I probably could have used my words or my characters more wisely. But what I don't say is, okay, I got it. I understand Frege. I go, okay, well, leading me to delve deeper into objective truth in relation to subjective meaning. And what is true is I did then do a talk, and what made me include this in the end was the fact that I did then deliver a talk to my peers on the implications of 2 + 2 = 4. If I remember, it essentially it's this idea that in Orwell and in 1984 you need 2 + 2 = 4, and from that everything follows. It's sort of the anchor by which you can move forward. Whereas in Dostoevsky and in Notes from the Underground, I think it's actually 2 times 2 = 4, but he speaks of that sort of the cage because you can't escape the rules of nature. And so this is something I had been interested in, and all linked together, and showed that this is actually for an English prize, but actually I was using the philosophy and it was staying relevant. And I did the same thing with, and you can see again, a school maths prize. Well, okay, what did I enter that doing? I did The Logical Problem of Evil by Gerald Mackey, using set notation, Venn diagrams, and all of that, which actually, you will see as well at Cambridge if you do end up here, or just end up doing philosophy in general, how important logic and maths are to modern philosophy. And again, I mentioned the fact that I spoke about Wittgenstein for my pre-German oral, where you have to do a presentation. So none of that is too impressive, but it does show a general interest in philosophy. As you see, I haven't won any essay prizes, I just didn't enter any, probably should have done. I haven't done all these things that you think, oh, I'm going to have to do that if I'm applying, all that. I've actually just I've read some books, maybe arguably I mentioned too many, and I should probably be in a bit more detail about them. But I read some books. I've engaged with philosophy. It's just actually the classic things you do if you were trying to work out if a subject was of interest to you. So, and then in the end, I bring it all back together with a sort of concluding sentence. Now, as you can see, I say I applied to reader philosophy. That's quite an Oxford phrase. I very much targeted this getting into Cambridge. Part of that is because philosophy is not necessarily so hard to get into at other universities, and my second choice was always going to be philosophy, and it didn't matter if I just focused on philosophy, I felt, because I had the grades and things. It did mean I didn't get into one of the universities I applied to, because I didn't speak about economics at all, which Henry, the guy who runs this channel, can tell you I don't understand. So maybe it would have been a good thing. But I very much targeted this at getting into philosophy, and particularly at Cambridge. I don't mention anything like I was house captain, I was, the GB kayak champion under 10. I wasn't either of those things, but, as an example, I actually just focused on this. But it depends what you're applying for, how much you like the idea of other universities, whether you want to do a gap year, whether you can do a gap year, as to whether you try and include all of that. But none of that will be useful to your Oxford application particularly. What you want to do for your Oxford application is focus on you and your suitability for the course, and why the course is suited to you, if that makes sense. So, to conclude, if you're still with me and not completely asleep, which I'm sure I'd be if I watched this back through, there's definitely no perfect formula for writing a personal statement. As you can see, I've got this journey of I start philosophy because of politics, and this takes me to political philosophy, takes me to meta-ethics, and takes me to language. You definitely don't need to do that. I had a friend that wrote his English personal statement solely on, the nature where he lives. Maybe say too much. But, it's very weird. Different people do different things. I think someone did their whole English personal statement, a different person on just one insect, and managed to do it off that. Now, obviously in English, you might be trying to be a bit more snazzy, but depends. I obviously mine might have been a bit dry, but I went for the simple formula of going, how are these sentences useful? And I think if you look back, I think each of the sentences tell you something more about my study into philosophy and the impact that had on me, and hopefully a few things I've done at points. Again, none of it's too impressive, but if there is a perfect formula, there is a formula at all, it's make sure you're using words usefully. And don't worry at the start about are you including, don't worry about the word count, don't worry about, exactly the right words, whether you're repeating words or not. I quite enjoyed editing all of that at the end, lots of people don't, but honestly, you'd be amazed how many characters you can cut, you'd be amazed how many words you can cut, and you'd be amazed how much you think, when you actually look at it all, do I need that bit? Is that bit useful? Well, actually you might not, so I just splurge onto a page everything possible that you could ever want to include. And sometimes you'll find extra links. I don't know if I had all those political philosophy linked, for example, at the start, in the way that I did when I finished it. I mean, it seemed they were a lot more disjointed. I think, in fact, my second paragraph, my third paragraph were completely reversed for quite a long time, or even it was in completely reverse order. But eventually, this is where I got to. So I've said both of these things. Make sure every sentence is useful. How you demonstrate your interest in the subject. And finally, this point about quality, not quantity, I meant to cover it a slight bit more in the rest of the video. But it is this idea: if you're including videos, so if you're including books or you're including stuff you've done, it's much more important that each one it's clear why each one is there, rather than including just everything you've done. There are some books, actually an interesting one is History of Western Philosophy. I read that, it was a really good introduction. Well, I read some of it, it's really long, wouldn't recommend wasting your time on it now, but if you're ever bored, if you're applying a long time in the future, maybe have a look, or look at the sections which are relevant to you. But when I use that at the start, I don't actually cite the book in a way that maybe I could have done, and I originally wanted to write more about it. Really make sure that everything you're including is relevant, try and make it so it works well together, and try and show the impact of everything on you. So if you want any more advice, I will be, I do tutor with Oxford Economics. If you're going for PPE or philosophy, then I can help on both of those. Please comment under the video, and I will, under the guise of being Henry, get back in, and I'll hopefully get back in touch, hopefully help. And I hope this has been of help to all of you who are applying either this year or in years to come.